Christian parenting.
You just don't get it. You don't understand. Have you ever heard those words from your teenager? Join us today as we talk about connecting with our teens.
Hi, my name is Lissy Rienow. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Rienow, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversations.
Hi, Rob Rienow here again from Visionary Family Ministries with our very special guest, my daughter Lissy. If you missed last week's episode, please go back and listen. It was phenomenal. But Lissy, for those who have not listened to what you shared last week, can you introduce yourself again?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lissy. I'm 21. I'm the second Reno kid. I am a student. I'm a senior in college at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a history teaching major there, so I've got one semester left, and then we'll see what the Lord has in store after that.
And you had big news recently?
Yes. So I recently got engaged to my fiance, Bond, and so we are hoping to get married sometime in the next year, which is super exciting.
High school sweethearts?
Yes. High school sweethearts.
Well, we love you and we love Bond. He is an unbelievable guy, and we are so excited that God has brought the two of you together. So your brother got married in 2020. You're going to get married, God willing, in 2021.
Fingers
so
crossed.
Here we go. And I will tell you, there is already a difference between father of the groom and father of the bride. With the father of the groom, there's a little bit of, all right, kid, you're ready to go. You found Mrs. Right. Go get married. Giving away daughter is a whole different level for me here. So I'm going to see if I can hold it together over the course of the next coming months. But God's brought a wonderful man into your life, so I'm happy to put your hand into his. Okay, Lissy, you're 21 years old, and when you were 19, you wrote a book for parents called The Heart of Your Teen. How did you write a book for parents as a 19-year-old?
Well, that is a very interesting story, and one that I definitely would never have expected to be telling someday. But essentially, I took a gap year after high school, and I got involved working with Visionary Family Ministries and really just felt like the Lord had given me a passion for helping teenagers live for Christ in their family relationships at home. And so I wrote a short devotional for teenagers, had the privilege of starting to speak with you. And, one of your publishers, Randall House, they had kind of heard some of the things that I was speaking about. They had read my devotional. And I was kind of, back of my mind was kind of hoping, wouldn't it be so great if I could write a book for teenagers on sort of all this family relationship stuff. So Randall House ended up reaching out to me, and they said, hey, Lissy, we would love for you to possibly do a book with us. And I was like, awesome, great. Like, that sounds wonderful. And they were like, but we don't want you to write a book for teenagers. We want you to write a book for parents, kind of like on how to have a better relationship from the teen perspective.
Okay.
And when I first heard that, I was like a little taken off guard. I was like, you know what? I'm not a parent. I'm not an expert on parenting. Like, I wouldn't even know where to start on this type of project. Like, maybe I could write a page. Maybe. That would be pushing it a little bit. But I remember you and Mom kind of counseling me, and you're like, hey, you know what? If God is opening up this door for you at 19 years old, submit a proposal, like think about it, pray about it, and just let God do the rest. And so that's what I did, and Randall House ended up accepting my proposal, and we got to write this book together. And it was really an amazing process of just seeing kind of God put all those pieces together. And I think the end result was really a really powerful message to parents.
Yeah, the feedback on the book has been incredible. Now, you interviewed 20 teenagers from different parts of the world. You heard their stories, and what you did is you wanted to find out, what did their parents do that helped them grow in their faith, to strengthen their character and relationships, and then what did they do maybe that didn't help? What did they do that hindered their faith or damaged their relationships? And I think some of the most impactful stories were from teenagers who said, I wish my parents had, ... I wish they had done this. I wish they had not done that. And in a minute, I'm going to talk to you about some of those. But this first chapter is really important, where you talk about this principle that relationship has to come before discipleship.
Absolutely. And, I think one of the most powerful things about this project was this process of interviewing teenagers because, my own experience growing up in our household, I didn't feel like was enough to sort of cover this whole issue. And so I wanted to get as many different perspectives as possible when it came to writing this book. And so, as I'm talking to teenagers and just asking like, hey, what did your parents do really well while you were in high school? And, what are some things that maybe weren't so good, maybe could have been done differently? And, I was just absolutely blown away by some of the answers that I received. And I think what was most surprising to me was, despite everyone's different backgrounds, the answers were so shockingly similar, kind of across the board, with things like, I wish my parents had asked me more intentional questions about my life. Like, I wish they had done this. I wish they had done that. And so kind of like the core theme that we were getting at and sort of the common thread through all of them was just this idea of, before parents could have a discipleship relationship with their teenager, they had to first put in the effort of just building a relationship with them. Like, you can't have discipleship without a relationship. And, we listen to people, I think especially as teenagers, we listen to people that we trust. We listen to people that we have these warm, connected relationships with. And so, kind of in my experience, I've seen so many Christian parents with the best intentions trying to spiritually disciple their teenager, but the relationship was full of hurt and it was full of bitterness and it was full of anger. And so those things had to be addressed first from a relational perspective before they could move into, how to spiritually disciple their teen. And, one of a really powerful testimony, and I'm going to read some of these just even throughout this podcast interview. But one girl said, I got super annoyed when my dad tried to disciple me spiritually because it didn't feel like there was love in our relationship. Whenever he told me about biblical things, it just made me mad, and I would tell him that I didn't want to hear it. The weird part was, when reading them on my own, they were actually meaningful to me. The state of my relationship with my dad made it really hard for me to accept anything he had to say, even if it was actually helpful.
All right, so here's a teenage girl who had a dad who's trying to speak truth into her life, but she didn't want to hear any of it because there wasn't a heart connection for her. It reminds me of this passage we talk a lot about, Proverbs 23:26, where Solomon's writing to his son, and he says, "My son, give me your heart." Like, let me into your life. And there's that principle, that relationship has to come before discipleship. All right, let's talk about some of these I wish my parents had stories that you heard.
Yeah, so one of the themes that I kind of focused on a lot with teenagers is just, this idea of spiritual life and what parents can do that's helpful when helping their teen spiritually, and then maybe some things that weren't so helpful. And a lot of teenagers said, I wish my parents didn't disconnect from my spiritual life when I was in high school. I remember one teenage boy sharing with me, he said, I have amazing Christian parents, and I'm thankful for the way they've set an example for me. However, I had to take my own initiative when it came to my spiritual growth and devotions. There were times in high school where I wasn't engaging in any sort of personal relationship with God. I wish my parents had asked me more questions about how I was doing spiritually rather than just assuming that I was on the right path. And, I think there's kind of, in this area, parents can either fall into like two pitfalls, I feel like. There's sort of the side of, maybe not asking enough, maybe not, sort of stepping back and not asking enough questions. And then there's also the side of maybe asking a little bit too much. And so I think a good indicator, kind of like what we were talking about before, is that, if you're trying to bring up spiritual things with your teenager and their instant reaction is annoyance or anger, or you can just tell that they're a little bristly about it, what I would encourage you is, maybe you don't have a spiritual problem, but you have a relational problem that needs to be addressed. And so sometimes it could take a parent being like, hey, I noticed that when I tried to bring up spiritual things, it just seems to make you a little bit annoyed. It makes you a little bit angry. Can you tell me more about that? Like, can you talk to me more about why you might be having those feelings?
What's interesting, I think that what we normally hear is that parents are way too involved, way too controlling, way too micromanaging. And you did have some stories in the book with that negative pattern. But it seemed like the majority were saying that these teenagers were saying that they wish their parents were more involved spiritually or had continued spiritual conversations with them. And in fact, one of the main threads that you discovered was this feeling that teenagers had that their parents connected with them one way when they were younger, but now differently as teenagers. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the stories that stood out to me the most was, there's this girl that I talked to, and she talked all about how, her parents did such a great job of, kind of leading their family spiritually when she was younger. She was like, my parents would read Bible stories to us all the time. We would always pray before bed. We had a family memory verse every week. And those are things that I really remember about my childhood and really made an impact on me and made an impact on my faith. And then kind of as me and my siblings got older, those things kind of stopped. And I think that some of it had to do with busyness, but a lot of it had to do with, I think my parents just sort of assumed that we wouldn't want to do those things anymore. And, she was talking about how she had a younger sister who I think was 10 at the time. And she was like, my younger sister isn't growing up with any of that same spiritual intentionality that I did. And I'm worried that she is not going to have that same foundation. So I wish my parents hadn't assumed that just because we were older, it meant that we didn't want them to do those things anymore with us.
Yeah, it's very common for parents to start with a stronger spiritual connection when they're kids, toddlers, preschoolers, even elementary school. But as schedules and craziness or just distance in the relationships grow, fewer and fewer parents are praying with their junior hires and high schoolers or asking them to participate in a family worship or family Bible time. So please, if you've fallen into that pattern, that it's not too late, never too late to reboot that prayer time. You just go to your high schooler and say, hey, when you were younger, we used to pray together before bed. And I'm sorry that I've kind of let that slide. But the reality is we may need that prayer time now more than we ever needed it before. You are a young adult, you're a young man, you're a young woman. You're making choices in your life that can have lifelong consequences. You're getting ready to launch out of our house here. And one of the things you talk about a lot in the book is the importance of launch angle, right? Even if a launch angle is even off a little bit, that can be a great concern. So going to your teenager and saying, hey, I just want to reconnect with you spiritually. All right, here's another one. I wish my parents had given me more accountability with social media. Now, again, that sounds like the total opposite of what I would expect. I would expect, Mom, Dad, get out of my life. It's my phone. I can do what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was such an interesting topic because really, my generation is one of the first generations to grow up in this world of social media. And for a lot of parents, it's hard to navigate that with their kid. It's hard to navigate something that they didn't have when they were growing up. And it's a whole new world of communication and exposure, and there's so many different layers, and we could talk about the benefits of social media and the negatives of social media. I really believe there are both positives and negatives to that, and I think that could be a really important conversation to have with your teenager. We should do that in a future episode too. Absolutely, kind of working through. There are negatives about it, but there's also a lot of positives too. So let's talk about both. But one of the things that kind of talk a lot about in the book and in this chapter on technology is just really the importance of accountability in the home. And I think that that's something that you and Mom did a really great job of modeling for us, was just creating this culture of openness, especially when it came to our technology. I remember when I got my phone when I was 13, day one, there was this expectation of your phone is not your private information. Like, I have your passwords. Like, I can access it whenever I want. Like, we are keeping everything out in the light and out in the open because sin thrives in secrecy. So we're not going to put in, any opportunity for there to be secrecy when it comes to technology. And, you do. I know you and Mom do that with your technology too. So,
Right.
There's this, I love what you say, like, you're never too old for accountability. Like, accountability isn't just a kid thing. It's your whole life thing. We need accountability.
And no one is holy enough for a secret online life.
No, absolutely not. And so I think it's really powerful first setting that example as parents and saying, I don't even have that type of access on my technology. So, we're going to start now with you and training you to make sure that we're keeping each other accountable. And, we talk about Snapchat, and I think Snapchat can be a controversial social media. And we sort of made this policy in our home that, with Snapchat, there's no accountability. And that's not to say, if you get a Snapchat, you're automatically going to do something bad. But we chose to have social media accounts that allowed for us to have accountability with them and allowed for it to be out in the open and, to have for people to have access to them and to kind of see what we were posting. And so for that reason, I was really grateful not to have a Snapchat in high school. And even talking with teenagers, one of the most interesting things that just so surprised me was I asked them, I think this was a question I asked almost everybody, but I was like, hey, I want you to imagine that you are the parent of a middle schooler and, they just get their phone. Are you going to would you let them get social media? And 100% across the board, they were like, absolutely not. There is no way I would let my middle school child get
These are
social media.
high schoolers answering that question.
Yeah, high schoolers. They're like, there's just too much junk. There's too much junk. And, maybe when we get in high school, we could talk about Instagram. We could talk about Facebook, maybe. We could talk about some other things. But they were like, I would say probably 90% of them said, I'm never letting my kids get a Snapchat.
Wow.
And these are kids that have had Snapchats since it came out. But there was this sort of overwhelming response of, absolutely not. Wow. I would not let my child have that.
Yeah, the interviews and more of the details in your book were so eye-opening. Lissy, you shared your story going through the teen years in our house. You wrestle with a lot of the key scriptures for sons and daughters and parents. You interview these 20 young people. At the end of the day, what's your big takeaway, your big challenge that you humbly share with parents of teenagers?
Yeah, and my whole heart for this book, like I said, I'm not an expert on parenting. I'm not coming to you with Lissy Rienow's great ideas on how to parent your teenager. My encouragement really that runs throughout is just, encouraging parents to never stop pursuing the heart of their teenager, to never stop pursuing a relationship with them, and also just encouraging them that it's never too late. One of the most powerful stories that I heard from a teenager was just this teenage boy. His parents went through a divorce when he was in high school, sort of a messy situation, and he was telling me about how, every morning he would come down to breakfast before school, and he would sit down and his mom would read the Bible to him every single morning. And he was like, most mornings I wouldn't even look her in the eye. I wouldn't even acknowledge her presence. I would just sit there, eat my cereal while she read, and then, get up and leave without saying a word. And he was like, but my mom continued to do that all throughout high school. And he's like, looking back, that had the biggest impact on me as a person and the biggest impact in my faith. And I'm so glad my mom never gave up on me, even though I didn't give her any encouragement or any indicator that what she was doing actually meant something. So just my encouragement to parents is that while it can seem really discouraging at times and you're trying to break through but nothing is making a difference, those things do make a difference. And teenagers are taking notice of that, even if it might not be showing at the time.
Right. Amen. Well, Lissy, thanks for spending time talking to me. I know you're going to be here in the studio with Mom coming up, talking about mother-daughter relationships. And thanks for doing this project, The Heart of Your Teen. This book has helped so many parents, even around the world, as God has given you the opportunities to speak in Singapore and France and Scotland and Bolivia and the D6 conference and youth groups. God is opening up doors for you to help families follow Jesus. And your mom and I are thankful for God's work in your life. You can connect with Lissy and this book, The Heart of Your Teen, and other videos and resources that she has at visionaryfam.com/Lissy. That's Lissy, visionaryfam.com/Lissy. That's also the webpage for contacting Lissy about speaking at your church or youth group event or parent-teen event. And again, Lissy will be back on Family Vision. We'll let you know when that is coming. As always, you can send your questions to us at podcast@visionaryfam.com. Connect with us on any of our social media channels. Just search Visionary Family Ministries. And I hope as you listen to these podcasts that as they're meaningful to you, that you'd share them with your friends, with your church, with your family. And we're able to share these messages with you because of the generosity of our ministry partners. And we want to thank you for your support. You can learn more about supporting our ministry to families around the world at visionaryfam.com/donate. And we'll see you next time on Family Vision.